Yo, Grand Rising, Grand Rising, Grand Rising. I hope everybody is having a great start to your day. So if you guys have been rocking with me for a little while, then you know that you could find me live on IG. And because I recently decided to go all in on YouTube, you're gonna find me here doing live. So this is my first live in a minute with YouTube. So we're just gonna go ahead and get right into it. This week I wanted to talk to everybody about self-sabotage. And you'll be seeing a video on the channel that will be much more concise when it comes to self-sabotage. But I wanted to be able to go a little bit more in depth and to have this stream of consciousness while having the conversation and addressing what self-sabotage looks like. Now in the video, I am going to utilize John Morant as a example. I've wrestled with this in all truth over the last 2 weeks that I've been working on the video on how I wanted to approach this, because John Morant is 23 years old, young man, superstar talent, with more money and access to him than he has ever had before, and probably more than any of us have ever had before. And so while everybody was quick to criticize him so heavily, I had to think about the grace that I would want somebody to give me. So I also wanted to make sure I gave that back to him. And so it made me start reflecting on my own spaces of self sabotage, where I've sabotaged myself on my road to greatness. And I'm still on that road, and how I self sabotage myself now. And so I wanted to give you a more expanded version of that. Sada TKD, what's going on, brother? Thank you for joining. Um, and so how this actually affected my well-being and how it's actually affected my YouTube journey as well. So initially, when I came back into town 2013, I came back to Atlanta from New York, and for whatever reason YouTube had caught my attention. And when I started YouTube, I was like, man, I'm all in, I'm going to do these things. And I started to have a little bit of traction. I was learning how to work the video camera. I was learning how to maneuver the thumbnails and descriptions. Very, very rudimentary, elementary type of style, but it was still exciting. And then I started listening to people who were telling me, oh, you should do this. Oh, you should do this. You need to be working on this. You should be doing this. Everything that was taking me away from the thing that I actually wanted to accomplish. And I found myself in this cycle because I've done this before. When I was in probably first or second year of college, same thing kind of happened. I was a stylish guy. I was a guy who was really starting to obtain and to grow and learn and be excited about his own style. And I started listening to people like, man, you're doing too much. You're dressing up too much. You're trying to be extra. And in both cases, when I allowed myself to listen to these other people, I found that I began to sabotage myself. So I briefly wanted to talk about what that can look like, especially from a stylish standpoint, because this is the best, most visual way for you to see it. So initially what was happening was you get something inside of your mind, right? And you believe that it's not for you, that you're not supposed to have it, that you got away with somebody. And this is kind of the scam or the con uh, that your conscience will give you. So the scam will be no different than if you were to buy a knockoff brand. And people will deny it, but everybody has done it or at least thought about it. And I was a dude when I was early high school. I would, man, let me try to get the knockoff, the knockoff designer Air Force Ones. You guys remember you go get the Air Force Ones and they put the fake fabric on there, the knockoff fabric. Put a one in the chat if you remember being able to do that. Or you go to the mall and you get the big glass earrings. When I used to wear earrings, the big glass earrings that would be in your ear, all of these things. Or when you got older, maybe you went and got a knockoff watch from, street vendor. When I lived in New York, you go to Canal, get a knockoff Rolex for $100, right? So in all these different types of scenarios, that was the scam. It was like, yo, I'm gonna get this item, or I'm gonna get this thing. And what happens is in your subconscious, you don't believe that you deserve that. You believe that you have gotten away with something. And most criminals will tell you, unless they're sociopaths, they'll tell you like every time that I got away with something, I was kind of looking over my shoulder, and they would start to get into a groove. And the minute that they said, "Oh, I'm not even gonna worry about that," that's when they got caught, right? Self sabotage in that same space. And so we would wear these fake jewels. They weren't jewels. The fake glass, fake watch, fake shoes, and would feel like we were getting over on somebody. But like I said, if unless you're a person who has some bad psychological or some concerning psychological issues, that's going to affect you. And so you're going to move as if you are inauthentic because you're not being the true version of yourself, right? And so as I began to find myself in this situation stylistically, I was doing other things that were out of character. I was going out and I was getting drunk. I was starting to hang out with people who I didn't really vibe with. Now, these weren't bad characters or guys who were wishing ill intent on communities. It wasn't like I was hanging out with hustlers or gang members or any of those types of things. I was just hanging out with dudes who I didn't really enjoy. I didn't really enjoy their company. We didn't really have anything in common, and they just went out and drunk and would go out and drink, and I would go out and drink. And so we just kind of hung out, right? And so I wasn't ever expanding, growing, developing, or any of the things that I internally wanted to do. I was just continuously going down this hill. And it wasn't until a friend of mine pulled me to the side. I was like, "Yo, what are you doing?" And I was like, "What you mean?" They were like, "This isn't you. Like, why are you acting like you're something that you're not?" And we're gonna talk about the imposter syndrome and how uh, the how our self sabotage can affect that, right? But same thing happened when I came here back to Atlanta. I knew that I wanted to teach. I knew that I wanted to develop. I knew I wanted to grow individuals, especially men, when it came to the style thing and when it came to life and style. And I allowed other people to start getting in my head. And so what happened was I started to stop doing what worked for me. And a lot of times we'll stop doing what works for us. So if you've been rocking with me for a little while, you know that we're going to talk about our consciousness, the closet and its construction, and ultimately what that communicates to the world and how that connects us or disconnects us. And so consciously what will happen for a lot of us in these situations is we will find ourselves saying something in our heads. We'll be saying like, you know, you don't really want to do this. You don't feel like it today. Nobody's gonna pay attention. Nobody's gonna miss you. Nobody's going to be affected if you're not showing up. It's fine. Skip it today. And at the time, I was doing a video, I think every day. If not every day, at least 5 to 6 times a week, right? And what I started to allow myself to do was to play this trick that nobody's paying attention, or you only got one comment, you only got one like, as if I had earned, right? I had earned hundreds or thousands of likes or thousands of watch time or 1,000 hours of watch time or engagement, as if I hadn't just started. And so what ended up happening was I began to allow myself to tank it and to have, despite having people who are commenting like, "Man, you need more followers. I wish that you were posting even more. I really appreciate your comments." I was missing all of those things and focusing on the negatives. Like, I only got 10 likes. It should have been 100 likes. I thought this was great content, what have you. Not realizing that in that space when I'm doing that, I'm being fraudulent. I'm expecting to get over on somebody, knowing that I haven't improved my content, I haven't improved my delivery, I haven't improved my study, I haven't improved how I'm going to convey this content so that it can be clear and concise. I haven't done those things. I haven't earned that engagement. I haven't earned that expression. I haven't earned the ensemble that is going to come with that. And this often happens when I'm dealing with a lot of new cats who even may have the financial resources, but they haven't earned the knowledge base on how they're going to construct their wardrobe. And what ends up happening is they show up, "Yo, I got bread." Okay, that's great. Yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and buy all this other stuff. But you don't realize, even though you got something that is real, right? You got a real designer piece. You don't realize how inauthentic and how fraudulent and fake that is for your own personal expression. And so you're thrown off when you're throwing it on and you're like, do I look good? Right? Are people rocking with this? Well, if they are, then that's great. If they aren't, that's great. Because you know who you are. And once you know who you are, you don't have to take suggestions from anybody else. And so in that space, you start to, or I started to say like, oh, I'm gonna take some suggestions from somebody else who says I need to be out and I need to be in the mix. And doing all those things caused me to take myself away from the places that I wanted to be. And so I started to not feel like doing something, so I didn't do it. Then because I stopped doing it infrequently and I wasn't seeing any feedback, then that continued to take me away from the practice. And the third thing that happened was disconnection for me. So with the disconnection, what ended up happening was as soon as I got back on, people are like, where you been? What's been going on? And so when I would say, hop back on, like, oh yeah, guys, I've been gone for a sec, but I'm back. I'm gonna get started again. Just you watch. There was distrust because I said that the first time and didn't stay consistent. The second time didn't stay consistent. By the third time, people were like, nah, I'm not really rocking with you anymore because I can't trust what you're saying. I'm coming to you to get advice, to get perspective, to get insights on my image, and you're not there, right? And so they started finding other outlets to leverage and to utilize those things in order to show up as the best version of themselves. And Mikhail, man, what's going on? Thank you for joining. And so in that same space, what happened for me was I started to become disconnected, and so the cycle starts again. Nobody's gonna care anyway. I don't really feel nobody's gonna care, and I don't feel like doing it. I'm not going to do it, but I'm gonna say that I'm gonna do it, so I'm lying, right? I'm being dishonest, and then I am going to find myself disconnected. Well, the same thing happens in our personal style where we're self sabotaging in this space. We know that something that we are purchasing, something that we are obtaining, right, is not true to who we are or what we want to represent, how we want to show up, how we want to express ourselves or engage with the community that we're in, right? And so we do things that we know are not beneficial to us. So for me, it was going out to party and hang out and do all these different types of things that I did not enjoy. And that's fine maybe at 21, 22, but by the time you're 26, 27, 28, and you know what you like, you know what you enjoy doing, now you are discounting yourself, you are scamming yourself so that you can be in the mix or with the cool kids or what have you. And you're doing yourself a grave disservice because you're not going to feel like doing it, you're not going to want to do it, and yet you're going to find yourself in these spaces, and those spaces have consequences. And the consequences are not the dire things that a lot of people will talk about, in the sense that, like, yo, you get caught up in drugs and you're doing all these illicit substances or dealing with uh, challenging or destructive behavior in a very literal sense. Sometimes it's just you got a little too drunk, and the next day you wanted to wake up and work out, and now you can't. You wanted to save some money so that you could get something that was going to be beneficial for you in the long run, but you allowed yourself to be undisciplined and to purchase something that is not going to serve you well after whatever event you're getting it to, or you're trying to holler at that young lady who's not going to be of benefit to you in the long run because she looked like a fun sexual experience, right? There's all these elements that can cause you headache and heartache unnecessarily because you are sabotaging yourself. And it's subtle. It's always this subtle thing like, oh, I didn't feel like doing it. And before you know it, I didn't feel like working out today, so I'm just gonna go ahead and have something to eat. And this is the thing that I love about style. Style will tell on you before anything else, because your fit doesn't is not fitting anymore, right? And so you'll go and you've had donuts for breakfast for the last 4 weeks, haven't really worked out, and now that jacket that you love so much ain't closing the way that it's supposed to, right? Because you've been having donuts, right? So you're sabotaging yourself, even though you know that you want to show up as a better version of yourself. And this is why it's so important for you to address these elements of when you are self sabotaging. I had to. And I had to ask myself this important question consciously, and then how it constructed my connection to other people. What do you really want? What do you really want to do? So for you, I would ask you, what do you really want to do in this thing called life and this thing called style? Because it took me 10 years, unfortunately, but it was recently, probably about 2.5 years ago. I was out and I was doing something that I had no business doing. I didn't really want to do. And I was in the mix, having a drink, and was like, it's time for me to go. And I walked out, saw a homie of mine, was like, bro, I gotta go. He was like, bro, it's just stuff's just starting to get popping. Like, you wanna leave? And I was like, I don't fit in here. And he couldn't understand it because from the looks of it, and to everybody else, sometimes this will be how it looks. From the looks of it, everybody was like, "Yeah, you fit in. You one of the cool kids. You dress dope. You got your unique style. People rock with you. Like, yeah, you're exactly where you're supposed to be." No, and I'm sabotaging the man that I could be because I keep on allowing myself to find myself in this vicious cycle. And so, no, I don't belong here. And sometimes you have to figure out where you don't belong before you figure out where you do belong. Because that change of environment will change how you see yourself. There was a study that was done uh, observing an observant study that observed Vietnam veterans way back when, right? And they were addicted to heroin when they left Vietnam. And for you guys who don't know, heroin was a huge thing in the Vietnam War for people to cope, a lot of other different types of things. But when they came back to the Americas, there was a significant drop in their usage of the drug. And it was because their environment had changed. They come back with family, and even though they had to deal with the physiological withdrawal, they were able to because of the environment that they were in. And they did another study where they had drug addicts, the same heroin addicts, find themselves from rehab, or they observed them from going from rehab or a different environment back to their old environment. And within, I think, 3 months, they were using again because their environment was adding to their own self sabotage, right? It wasn't that they didn't want to change, they needed to change their environment. And so sometimes you have to figure out where you don't belong. I don't belong in this space. And even from a stylistic standpoint, you got to figure out where you don't belong. Just a quick story. We went out to this club when I was probably like 22, 23, and we used to always dress up, dress nice when we were going out. And we're at this club and we having a good time, drinking and at the time it was fun, right? We're drinking, we're dancing with these girls, and I remember dancing with this one girl. She looked back at me and she was like, nah, I'm good. And I was like, right, I'm trying to check everything to make sure everything is on point. I was like, what happened? Like, we was just grooving. And she was like, I mean, you're dressed up in a suit and I don't want to mess your suit up. And I was like, baby, that's dry cleaning. Like, I'm good. We good. Like, keep the party going. She was like, nah, this just isn't a good look. And I remember that hitting me. Like, one, I was a little tipsy, so I didn't go off on her or anything, but I was like, man, this man, right in my mind. But in reality, I was like, when I looked around, I don't belong here. It's a fun time. We're enjoying the experience to a certain degree, and at the same time, I don't belong in this environment. This isn't how I want to show up. So you had to figure out where you don't belong in order to start moving to the spaces and places and scenes and scenarios that you want to belong in. And then you have to figure out what truly fits your life and style. So many guys get it misconstrued and they see me in a suit and tie. And part of the reason why I have a shirt and tie on is because it's part of my business, right? It's me projecting my business card without having to have a business card, and they think that that's what I'm supposed to do. That's how I'm supposed to dress. That's how I'm supposed to show up. That's what I'm supposed to represent. And maybe that is the case when you are in your most formal or business driven element. But in the scenes and scenarios where you find yourself in a casual state or place, you being like this when you're hanging out at a kickback can actually be self sabotaging. It can actually promote like, oh, I'm above this, oh, I'm too good to be here, oh, I'm not looking to connect with anybody because I look like somebody who's overseeing everything, so I can't even really interact with people the way that I want to, right? So you can self-sabotage because you don't have a understanding of how you want to show up. And so many guys don't pay attention to how they want to show up, myself included. I've told the story before. Showed up at a kickback, realized I was way overdressed for the occasion. Was lucky enough to be able to leave my stuff with someone and to roll up my sleeves and kind of chill and kick back because I understood that the communication that I wanted to have was one of fun and enjoyment and having a good time. And that's the last element. When you start finding yourself sabotaging who you are, you can actually derail yourself from the best connections that could have been beneficial to you. Now, I'm not saying that you should give up on people, nor am I saying that people should give up on you just because you're in a bad state or you're in a bad place. Because we're all human and we're all fallible, right? Um, my bad, J3. I wanted to make sure I saw your comment. Uh, and guys, I apologize. I'm still learning how to work the new live. J3 said perfect timing for this topic and many guys dressing. Okay, trying to find that. Many guys find dressing well in the summer, hot months as a challenge. Get the likes up by the I will. I'll work on that. Yeah, and actually Friday that's what we'll talk about. We'll talk about the self sabotage that guys do in the summertime. Some of the things that they do for that. But in this space, we start finding ourselves disconnected because we're being dishonest. So you're being fraudulent with how you're showing up. You're being disconnected because you don't really want to be there anyway. And then people start to distrust who you are. So just going back to the analogy of the fake jewelry or fake watches or fake J's, this one of the things that actually stopped me from doing those things very, very early on was the incongruency. So have you ever seen a guy who will show up with a Rolex, right? Let's say he has a Rolex on. He has a Rolex on, but then for whatever reason you happen to see what kind of car he drives and he's driving a Toyota Camry, or you've seen the dude who has the Mercedes, like the high end Mercedes, but is living in a like low budget apartment. At first you was like, oh, he was just visiting, but then you start seeing him pull up every day because you're at the apartment, you're still on your grind, you're still on your come up, and he's pulling up every day in that car. Well, there's kind of a incongruency that happens. There's not kind of, there's an incongruency that happens in that space where your mind can't really process how those two things go together, because a Rolex is associated with wealth on some level and success. A Mercedes Benz is associated with wealth and some sort of success, right? It's not about what you can afford to purchase, it's about what you can afford to maintain, right? I always say it's not about what you can afford to buy, it's about what you can afford to maintain. And so you'll see these guys and there's an incongruency there. And if there's an incongruency there, there's going to be a distrust there. If you are a dude who's riding around in a hoopty and you really did buy a Rolex, somewhere your priorities are messed up. And that was cool when you were in your early 20s. Not so cool when you're in your 30s or getting close to your 40s, right? There needs to be a understanding of your process. And you don't realize that you are sabotaging yourself because you could have invested that money into something that would have garnered you 10 Rolexes, right? Would have garnered you two Mercedes Benzes if you needed them, right? Instead of trying to ball out of control or act like you are there when you're not there. And that self-sabotage sinks you because now here I am 10 years removed from YouTube consistently, or we'll say 7, and I keep on thinking about all of the things that I could have accomplished. And that is the last part that will often come when you are self-sabotaging, is it creates a synergy of regret, of shame to a certain degree, and it becomes very difficult for you to jump back on. It's become very difficult for me to jump back on because in my mind it's like, man, I'm supposed to be here, I should have been here, I should have been doing these things, I should have been doing these things, instead of saying, and this is what I'm working on, right? It's okay, you didn't, now you're here, now let's move. And it's just that easy. It's just as easy as you changing your clothes, right? It's you step into a dressing room and you say, you know what, I'm tired of wearing all the fake stuff. I'm gonna go get me a watch that I can afford. If I spent that money on this watch, I'm gonna go sell it, get some bread, put all the things that I want to be in position, and I'm gonna do this the right way. I'm gonna take a step back and reevaluate and get back on to the things that I want to get to. And when you start doing that, it changes your whole trajectory. And it's a slight deviation, seemingly, but it has the biggest changes in your life. And this is part of the reason why I started the YouTube live. I've been going live on Instagram for the last 4 weeks and said, you know what? I'm going all in on YouTube. And even though Instagram still will have a major place in this ecosystem, it's all about YouTube and me correcting the mistake. And this is why I love a dressing room as well. You can always make your missed takes, right? That's all a mistake is. It's a missed take. So we can reshoot it. As long as we have breath in our lungs, we can always reshoot and rescript and edit and do all the things that we need to do. And so this has been the focus. This is where my attention is going to be focused. And despite me self sabotaging and it not being as bad or as serious as John Morant's may have been, we're all capable of self sabotage at some point or another, partly because we may not feel like it. We may not feel like we should be doing some of the things that we do, and yet we still find ourselves in. We will allow ourselves to get out of the practices and procedures and processes that have brought us some semblance of success or at the very least progress, and will then not understand why people find themselves distrusting or disconnected from us. But if we can break that cycle that we consistently find ourselves in, that's when we'll always show up as the best versions of ourselves. I don't know why I was looking over here. Camera's right here. Sorry. So with that being said, I want you to try this on, see how it fits you. And if it fits you well, I want you to commit this day, actually the rest of this week, to showing up as your most authentic self. Even if you are self-sabotaging right now, that's perfectly fine. Because the minute that you are aware that you're creating a certain level of self-sabotage, the more likely you are to begin to sever that cycle that you've found yourself in, so that you can continuously and amazingly show up as the best version of yourself. And that's all this lifestyle thing is. It's you rehearsing your lines, knowing your script, being able to stick to it, to show up as the best version of yourself in life as well as style without saying a word. Because once you are your most authentic self, everybody else is going to be attracted to who that is. And you'll find that you're attracting the people that you need and repelling the people that you don't. So try this on, see how it fits you. And if you are looking to continue to develop your life and style, then hit that subscribe button. If you're watching this on the replay, or if you're watching it live and you stuck around this long, I appreciate you. Continue to be the amazing people that you are. And don't ever forget that dress is nothing more than the expression of a man's state of mind. So you, yes, you should always dress to address. I will see you Friday. All right, peace.